Okay, I think we'll kick off. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. And welcome to the webinar of ISQM1 implementation. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stuart Hines and I'm one of the audit partners here in London. So just what we're going to do today, so we're just going to give a very, very high level refresher on ISQM in terms of the process that we have to go through. Sorry, someone just joined. So the process we have to go through in terms of implementing a new quality management system in our firms. I'm just hearing there's a couple trying to get in, I'll just let those in. Okay, so we're going to give a quick overview in terms of, the main areas that we need to deal with in terms of IQM, and then I'm going to run through a tool that has been acquired by Ecovis International that the member firms can use that will aid them in terms of their ISQM implementation in their respective firms. And what we've also produced in the audit task force, so that was mainly Milosh, Armin, myself and Lewis, we have produced, if you like, a best practice version of the tool, which hopefully will be useful for you guys as you're going through the process or as you're revisiting the process if you've already made some good progress with your implementation. So just as a reminder, all audit firms or firms that provide audit services need to comply with ISQM. Initially, that you had to have a system in place by December 2022 for the vast majority of countries. I think some countries have agreed to implement a little bit later than that, but for the vast majority of us, we would have had to have had a system in place by December 2022. And what we will also have to do by December 2023 is appraise how that implementation has gone and whether we need to refine the systems that we've put in place. So again, that's part of what we've got to do 12 months after we've actually implemented. So I'm imagining the people on the call are going to be at various stages of their implementation journey. Some of you may have met the December 2022 deadline. Some of you may have continued to work on implementing ISQM, throughout 2023, and possibly some of you may be a little bit further behind and not quite started yet. So the information we're going to be providing is going to be useful, whatever stage of the process that you're at. And this is probably just, if you like, the first stage of us providing support to firms in terms of their implementation. So I anticipate that there will be further webinars and workshops at IPMs and RPMs, as we look to roll this out. Alex, are you able to, out of interest, let people in to the meeting, or is it just me that's got that power?
I think the power is with you, Stuart.
Okay. I'm going to do my best multitask then and let people in and run through the at the same time.
Okay.
So just bear with me because it's a little bit off-putting. Okay, so what I'm going to do very briefly is just give you a quick memory.
Can I interrupt there? I seem to have permission to admit people. Will I just take that?
Would you mind?
Yeah, that will if it works, I'll try there if it pops up again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's much appreciated. Okay, so can everybody see what I've just shared on screen? Is that a yes? Sorry, I can't see people's faces at the moment.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Yes. Thanks, everybody. Right, so this is just a quick overview, a quick memory jogger of ISQM1. and what we have to do. So there are 8 main elements to ISQM1, which are documented here. So we've got, the leadership responsibilities. So those charged with governance are responsible for implementing a system of quality management and promoting the right culture around quality and ethics, and effectively overseeing that system of quality management. We've got to deal with ethical requirements as part of our quality management system. We also need to think about acceptance, continuance of client relationships, and also specific engagements, and adhering to various ethical standards. Engagement performance, obviously another key aspect, making sure that we've got the right reviewers, the right quality of reviewers, people know what they're doing, and we're directing the engagements in the way that we should. Engagement quality reviews, so having policies and procedures as to when we need second partner reviews, again, is important. Monitoring and remediation. So this is where deficiencies in our quality management system arise when things go wrong, and it's how we as firms monitoring and remediating, so amending our quality management systems to make sure whatever went wrong won't recur in the future. Again, there's another piece around information and communication, making sure that we're providing the people with the information they need to be able to go and implement and follow the system. And as part of all of this, there's a risk assessment process. Okay, so there's 8 key elements to implementation of ISQM, which I've just given you a very quick run through there. Now, as I said, Ecovis International have acquired a tool to assist you in implementing this new quality management system, and I'm just going to run through that tool with you now. Some of you may have seen this before, because I think I presented this at an RPM not that long ago. So we will be going over the same ground, but I'm conscious that was just a regional partner meeting and not everybody would have been available at that point. And it was a very quick run through. Okay, so this is what we've acquired. So we acquired this from a technical provider that's based in the UK, a very reputable provider. They produced this tool which firms could acquire to assist them with their ISQM implementation. At the audit task force level, we looked at a number of different tools. There are Excel-based tools like this. There are other tools that are provided by Caseware and other providers. From an Ecovis International perspective, all firms are obliged to have a system of quality management in place, but all firms do not have to use this tool. Okay, you can use whatever tool that you want to have that system in place, but this is something that was acquired that we thought would be useful to provide to the network. And as I say, we've provided an illustration alongside this that people can use. Okay, so I'll just talk you through the main elements of this. So we've got, which is very useful, an instructions page. So this effectively takes you through the process. So what you would do is you would read this in detail, and then you would follow, if you like, the instructions that are set out here. So first part of the process will be to identify the quality objectives that you would have as a firm. And this tool will assist you in doing that, and we'll come on to that in a second. And then, having identified the quality objectives, what you would then do is a risk assessment of your firm, looking at your firm, looking at the type of work that you do, looking at how your firm is made up, what services do you provide, how risky are those services, what are the different sectors that you focus on, that type of thing. So you would effectively go through a process of identifying risks that your firm face as it relates to quality. And this is particularly in the area of audit. Okay, so this is audit focused. This isn't really focused around non-audit services, although obviously it is a useful process to go through for your whole firm, but it's mandatory for audit firms. Okay. Once you've done the risk assessment and you've identified the risks, what we then start to do is link the risks that we've identified with our quality management objectives. So we're saying, okay, well, here's our quality management objectives. Here are the risks associated with those objectives. And then what we need to do is assess those risks. You know, are they significant risks? Are they less significant? You know, go into the detail. And then finally, we then need to work out, okay, well, what is our response to this risk? What should our quality management system have in place to address these risks that we've identified? Okay, and that's again what this next section takes you through. So again, this is quite a useful overview sheet because it takes you through the requirement of ISQM, how you actually follow it on this tool, and it also gives you a few pointers as to things to think about as you're going through, which may not necessarily be addressed in this spreadsheet. Okay, so it's a very easy to follow process, and you know, if you follow this process, then you will have complied with the requirements under ISQM1. Okay, so I would recommend to anybody who's using this tool, make sure you read this first before you actually get into the detail. Make sure you understand, you know, flick through the other tabs on the spreadsheet. Make sure you've got a good understanding of what you're trying to do before you actually get into the detail. Okay. So the next tab is very useful. So these were some of the points I highlighted a minute ago on that Word document. So, you know, what are the quality objectives of a firm? You know, we've got the governance and leadership bit, we've got the ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance, engagement, performance, and resources, which is what I went through, and information and communication, which is what I went through earlier. Okay, so there's 6 on here. There were 8 on the other one because the other one included things like monitoring, for example. Okay, but this is very useful because what this has effectively done is it's gone through ISQM and it's pulled out all of the key objectives under all of the key headings, and it's cross-referred to where that information is in ISQM. If you want to go back to the, if you actually want to go back to the source documents and read in more detail, but this has summarized it for you and cross-referenced it, okay, across all the different quality objectives. So again, have a read of this and make sure you've got a good understanding of this before you go to the next stage. But this is a useful reference point as we're going through this process. So as I said, the next stage of the process is to do the risk assessment. Okay, and this spreadsheet here will assist you in that process. Now, what we've got over here on the left-hand side, we've got some information that is already populated. And this was populated by the firm that we acquired the tool from. So they've already started to put in some headings and started to give you some prompts as to what you need to be thinking about when you're doing your risk assessment. So, for example, if we just have a look at these, you know, consider the size and complexity of your firm, the legal structure and whether there's been any changes. Consider the engagement profile of your firm. And it goes through strategic and operational decisions, which is obviously quite important when we come to the governance section. Consider how the firm sets appropriate standards and targets. So there's a whole host of risks that have already been identified, which should be relevant for the vast majority of firms for you to go through. Okay, so it covers all sorts of areas: resources, people, intellectual property, technology. It covers a whole range of things. Okay, so there'll be a lot of that will be relevant for all of our firms because obviously the services that we provide are pretty similar and we provide them in a similar way. Laws and regs obviously is covered as well. And then you get into types of engagements. You know, are you doing pies? Are you not doing pies? Are you working in particular sectors? You know, do you need certain expertise to deliver some of the assignments that you work on? So again, there's quite a lot of information here that's already pre-populated to get you thinking about the risks as they're relevant to your business. Obviously, for all of us as part of Ecovis International, you know, that will be something that we'd need to consider as well, particularly when we're working with each other in the network cross-border to deliver, you know, global audit assignments. And then at the bottom, you can add your own specific risks that haven't been picked up already up here. Okay, so I think that's a useful starting point and will certainly, you know, get you thinking about what risks are appropriate for your business. The idea then is that you complete this box, so you put in the detail as, you know, answering these questions effectively. You know, we've got 7 partners in the firm, you know, 4 of them are audit partners, and, you know, these sorts of things with structures as a limited company or an LLP or whatever it might be. So you start to put the information in here, and you start to identify what risks are appropriate in respect of, you know, these particular questions. Okay. And then just as we move to the right of the spreadsheet, you know, have we identified a quality risk, yes or no? And if we have identified a quality risk, you know, what is that quality risk? So we're putting a description here as to all of these risks as they relate to these questions. Okay. And then what we do effectively is we cross-reference those risks to these particular quality objectives. So is it a governance and leadership risk, or a risk that's relevant for governance and leadership quality objectives? Is it ethical? Is it continuance, engagement, performance, etc.? Okay. And then what you will do as you identify, let's say, for example, it's governance and leadership, we will then start to create different risks, which we're going to cross-refer into the next section. Okay, and that will be, so this will then say, okay, well, we need to go to the governance leadership tab, and GL1 is the risk, and then we need to go on and do some more work in respect to that risk. Okay, so that's the idea of this sheet, that we're identifying all of the risks to quality that are relevant for our firm, and then we're cross-referring them into the different, you know, we're mapping them across to the different quality objectives. Okay, so it's all pretty logical and straightforward so far. So that's what this sheet does. And then, for example, for each of those different categories, we've then got a tab. So we've got governance and leadership, ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance, etc. Okay, so what we would then do if we look at governance and leadership, so we saw on the previous sheet that we had a risk that was referenced to GL1. So this will automatically pull through that information that you typed up on the previous sheet where we had the quality risk. And then what we will have to do is go and fill in an assessment of each of those risks that have been identified. So again, is it a significant risk that could have high impact on our business? Is it a fairly negligible risk? You know, does it come up on a regular basis, or is it infrequent or whatever? So, you know, you would type in here some sort of assessment of that risk, you know, because that will dictate the extent to which we need to have a control in place, or we don't. Okay. And then here, what you can do is we will then map it to the quality objectives. So again, on that original sheet I showed here, so each of these sections here under each quality objective have been included where it's relevant on the top of this sheet. Okay, so this is just copied over from that previous sheet. And what we will do as we're going through the risks and we're assessing the risks, what we will then be doing is mapping them to one of these quality objectives that are under ISQM1. Okay, and you can see here as we fill this in, then it starts to update here. So we can see, have we met all of our quality objectives, or do we have some that have still got zeros that we might need to think about? And you might have a number of different quality objectives, you know, that you'll do. So that's gone to 2, right? So that's effectively the next stage of the process, which is to look at all the different categories: governance and leadership, ethical, etc. Pull through those risks allocated into each section, and then start to cross-refer that to the quality objectives under ISQM1. And again, there's all the references if you want to go back to the source documents. Okay. Then once we've identified the risks and we've assessed the risk, we then need to decide what response we are going to have in respect to that risk, or whether no response is required. Okay, so again, you know, just following this example through GL1, we come into here, and then we may have a number of different responses in respect of that particular risk that we've identified, and we would document those in this box. And where we've got documentation that we want to cross-reference it to, we might do it here. So for example, in governance, you know, one of the controls might be it's discussed at monthly partner meetings, so we might put a link here to the partner meeting minutes. Or we might have, you know, policies and procedures on our intranet, and we'd put a link here to our policy and procedure on our intranet. Okay. And then there's a box here for any other comments, if things crop up that you just want to make a note of as you're going through this process. Okay, so that's how this section works, and you basically follow that process through for all the different areas on the ethical, the acceptance and continuance, engagement, performance, resources, etc. Okay. Now, what we've also got as part of this tool is, and this doesn't have to be used, but it's quite useful as what we found when we were going through this process of identifying risks and working out our responses to risks and reviewing our policies and procedures. We had a few gaps, and we had a few things that we wanted to do. You know, new policies and procedures that we wanted to put in place, or we had policies and procedures but they weren't documented anywhere. So as you're going through the process, this is basically a little to-do list of things that you can do under each section, where you might need to put in place a new policy and procedure, or you might need to tweak something, or you might need to document something a bit better. But this is just a list that you can pull together as you're going through the process, and then allocate the actions to the individuals and just follow it through to make sure that they've been dealt with. Okay, so it's not mandatory part of ISQM, but it's quite a useful tool as you're going through this process. The final element of ISQM, and possibly one of the more challenging areas, if you ask me, is that having set up a system of quality management, what we need to do as firms and as partners is we need to monitor how we're performing against that system of quality management. Okay, so as and when things go wrong, so for example, an audit might go wrong, or we get a complaint from a client or something of that nature, as things go wrong, we should be understanding what's gone wrong, and we should be doing a root cause analysis to understand why it went wrong, and then we should potentially be taking remedial action. So it might be that our system of quality management had a deficiency in it, so there was a gap that resulted in a problem, so we need to put in a new policy in that particular area such that that problem doesn't arise again. Or we may have had a control, but that control was able to be overridden, or whatever it might be. But as and when things go wrong, you know, a key part of having an effective quality management system is that we're continually monitoring how we're performing, and when things do go wrong, we're making sure we understand it and we're taking corrective action so it doesn't happen in the future. So this is a good spreadsheet that will assist you with that, but you'll need to work out how do you collate that information and how do you deal with it. So, you know, should this be a standing agenda point at your partner meeting? You know, when complaints happen, what is your process? You know, do they get put on a complaints register or whatever else? So I think the main challenge here is making sure that whoever's doing the monitoring is getting all of the information of things going wrong, and it's not just going under the radar, and then it can go on here, it can be tracked, and it can be addressed.
So Stuart, sorry, excuse me here. If you are talking here about the last sheet, that as if the company is doing a certain quality control on her system, on her these objectives on her system, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Because let's say for argument's sake, you know, you did an incorrect tax computer. I mean, I'm talking about tax, but let's say an audit went wrong for whatever reason. Client complained about an audit because we had a prior year adjustment because we missed something in the previous year. So something like that should come onto this register, and somebody should undertake an investigation to find out why was that missed last year. You know, was it a fact the client didn't tell us? Did we have the information but we missed it? Was the file not reviewed in enough detail? Whatever it is, you know, understand what went wrong, why did it go wrong, and then, okay, well, what can we do next time to ensure that that type of problem doesn't arise again? So, you know, you're always coming back to your system and saying, okay, well, our system, you know, didn't manage to control this error. So where is the problem in the system, and how does the system need to change?
So this is yeah, the example that you have given now. It falls under the information and communication when something went wrong with the client, or under which section you can see it? Under resources.
Well, I mean, it would depend on the specific. Let's say, for example, you had an audit that didn't go well. The client said, I'm not happy. And the reason it didn't go well is because the person that you allocated to do the audit didn't have enough experience, right? So that would be the resources. That is an issue with an individual. And as part of your quality management system, you should have a process whereby only people that have the skills to do a particular audit are allocated to that audit. So in that instance, that didn't happen. So you go back to your quality management system and say, well, why did that occur? Why did we end up with the wrong person on this job? And how can we tighten up on that area?
Okay. Second question, Steve. You know that this is the ISQM1 and ISQM2, and we are now superseding the ISQC1. Is there anything that you have prepared to see the difference? What was new and what was applied from ISQC1, and what was changed, or what was the changes? Is there any comparative on this information?
Well, I think ISQC1 was very focused around the engagement itself. So it was around, you know, the actual quality as it relates to an audit. So to my mind, ISQC1 is very similar to ISQM2 because, again, that is focused on, you know, the engagement. ISQM1 is a whole new standard. It's around the quality management system. So I think, you know, to answer your question, ISQM1 I see as a brand new standard that we have to deal with, and I would see ISQM2 and ISQC1, the old version, being fairly comparable.
Okay, so as I see it, so the ISQM1 is related mainly to the governance of the practice.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Are you going to share this? Are you going to share this information, or how are we going to have it?
No, I'll get on to that in a second. Absolutely, Tony. So what I think you'll find, and what we're seeing in the UK, is when you have your regulator come and do a visit, part of the practice management visit, that's how they do it in the UK. They do different types of visits, but we have a practice assurance visit. They'll be looking at our systems, policies, and controls. So this will now form part of their reviews that they want to do when they visit our firm. Okay. So to answer a specific question, this is going to be made available on the intranet, and we'll follow up after this meeting with a link so that everybody can access it. Okay.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Stuart.
Hi, Milosh.
Yeah, I just add something to the question, to the comparison to the ISQC1 and newly ISQM1 or 2. You correctly said that it was more focused on the engagement performance, but when we go through these two standards, they are the similar or the same issues or topic: leadership, human resources, monitoring. Yeah. From my point of view, the biggest difference between is that this ISQM1 and ISQM2 standards are really quality standards. That means that they require that you identify some risks and you set some responses to the risks. You design your internal process, you design your internal controls, and this tool help us to connect these processes and controls in the firm to the requirements of ISQM1, or mainly ISQM1, ISQM2 just in a minor. But this is, in my point of view, the general difference between this ISQC1 and ISQM1.
Thank you for that, Miloš.
And maybe I also can add, and it's a management system, which means it's not a one-time event. It's always caused actions, reactions, identify new, and go back, and it's an ongoing process. That's what pointed out in ISQM1.
I think that's a really important point, Armin, because obviously, you know, this isn't a one-time exercise. This is just the first part of a process, because your business will change over time. You know, you might get into a new particular market, you might be providing new services. So you will need to, as and when that happens, revisit your quality management system to make sure what you've got set up is appropriate, you know, as your business evolves over time. So it should be, and I guess one of the questions that we're going to be asked when we have these assurance visits is, you know, how, you know, they're going to want to see evidence of us evolving our systems as our business evolves, and what are the actual mechanisms to make that happen, you know, and making sure that's documented as well. So yeah, I think they're all important points. I'm just going to come on to now, I'm just going to share something else which I hope you will find useful. So this will probably look familiar because it's what we went through a minute ago. But what we've done here is we have had a go of populating everything for you. Now, this is for illustrative purposes only. So, but what we thought it would be useful is to actually provide some real life examples. So the exercise that I did on my firm, the exercise Miloš did, Armin and Lewis, we all got together, we all went through our equivalents of this spreadsheet, and what we've tried to do is produce what we think is best practice, which will assist you in doing your process. Okay, so because what we do in terms of the services provided and the way that we do it and the resources that we used are very similar, it may be that some of these things here you can copy and paste into your own document, and they'll be exactly the same. For example, I would imagine that everybody is doing appraisals for staff. Okay, so that will be something that'd be quite easy to just copy out of this document and drop into your document. But there will be other elements where maybe we've got some slight similarities and some slight differences. You could use what we've documented as a starting point, and you could tailor it for your own particular circumstances. Or this might just be food for thought. So it might just help generate some ideas for you as you're going through your process. Okay, so hopefully you'll find that useful. I've just highlighted a couple of things here just to illustrate how it might work. So again, on this example here, so this was the question we saw earlier, consider the engagement profile of your firm. Do you specialize in particular industries and sectors? Are the engagements high risk or low risk, etc.? And this is a response that we came up with collectively, that you might also come up with something similar. The firm is an audit company providing assurance services to different particular sectors. Most of it's under IFRS, some of it's under German accounting standards. In terms of sector focus, media, financial markets, international and technology, and we've got some subsidiaries of large international groups. So that's and some of the audits are listed companies. Okay. Sorry, did I cut myself off there? Let me go back. Sorry about that. Okay. So that might be how you would respond to that particular comment. Okay. And then have we identified any quality risks? Yes, we have. And again, you can see here we've then cross-referenced it into the various sections. If I use this example here, GL4, and I go to governance, GL4, it's automatically pulled that narrative through from the previous spreadsheet, and then we can start going into the actual assessment of the risk and the responses to the risks. Okay, so it's all quite useful. It pulls the information through where it's appropriate. Okay.
Stuart, if we go back to the risk identification here, you are identifying in the description of the risk, you are identifying all the risk that the company, that the practice may have during this audit. You are identifying all of them, and you are replying on everyone. So it is now. Don't you think that is very much detailed in that way here? Risk of deviation from committees. So you are considering, does the firm specialize in certain industries and sector? How many engagement are complex? So the risk of deviation from commitment, risk of deviation from current interpretation of professional framework and industry, because personnel may not have the competency. You are identifying, you are listing all the risks here.
Correct.
That you may face while you are.
We are.
So this is what we should do.
Well, this is what we did. I mean, what we found, and the other guys can chip in at this point as well. What we found was we ended up identifying lots and lots of risks, but quite a lot of those risks were fairly insignificant. So that's why when you come on later, what you might, one of the things we considered was, okay, well, let's document all the risks as a starting point, but then let's actually group those risks by high risk, medium risk, low risk, and let's almost forget the low risk ones and let's focus on the high risk ones. But our starting point for this was, it was like a brainstorming session. Okay, so two of us went through this process in my office. Two of us did this together, and we were just brainstorming. We were just putting everything down, and then later on we looked at assessing those risks and saying, okay, is it really a risk? Is it significant? Is it really impactful on our business, or is it fairly insignificant? It is a risk, but it's not that important. And I think what you might want to do, which we didn't do, but I think would be a good idea, as you're then filling in these sections, you might color code it between high, medium and low, and then you can be more focused in terms of actually working towards addressing those risks.
Yes, so we should prioritize those risks. This is what we are saying, correct?
I think so, personally, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if you want, you can, those risks that you have identified, you can identify additional 10 risks related to the topic that you have mentioned.
Yeah, again, it's how far
If you want to continue, yes, if you want to continue to identify risks, then each one of them you can go with a list of 10 to 15 risks. So we need to focus on what the risks the company has on this item.
Yeah, and I think there's, sometimes there's quite a bit of crossover. So you might, for example, have a risk you've identified and that would fall into the governance element, and it might fall into engagement performance, for example.
Mm.
And you might be looking at that when you're looking at, I don't know, the nature of the engagements that you're doing, and you might have exactly the same risks when you're looking at the resources side. Again, you might have, so, you know, there will be some duplication. And what you want to do when you're then pulling the risks through to here, you want to make sure, you know, if you've identified in 3 different areas the same risk, you all allocate them to GL3, and then you respond to them because you only need to respond to it once. Yeah, but as I say, the process we went through was 2 of us over a number of weeks. We went through this in a logical way. We brainstormed each section. We were just getting the information down. But as we got further on in the process, quite a lot of the risks we identified were not significant, in which case we said not do anything or put it on, you know, put it on fairly down the to-do list.
Thank you for the hard work and the hard job that you have done for those. So you identified a certain template to be used by all practices, and they may use the same risks because you identified the significant risk that you have that you are putting here. So it is thank you for all the effort.
That's okay. I think, as I say, I think it was a group effort. There was a few of us that got involved in this. But, you know, we were hoping, you know, 3 or 4 of us, we had to do it for our own firms anyway. You know, if we could collate it, come up with best practice, hopefully that would save 50, 60 other people a bit of time in their process. So I propose to go through all these examples, but we have literally gone through everything and put all the examples, filled in all of the other sheets as well, even to the extent of, you know, progress. You know, we identified, a couple of people identified as they were going through that we needed to document some policies and procedures that we had in place informally, but we wanted to formalize it. So hopefully, you know, you guys will find this very useful. And for those of you that have actually been through the process already, it'll be quite good just to cross-check what you came up with against what we came up with, just to make sure you've got everything covered off. You know, because we may have, yeah, again, we may just generate some ideas. And again, we will make that document available to everybody as well after this webinar. So I think that's probably it from me. I guess I don't know whether Armin, Lewis or Miloš have got anything to add to that, or whether we've got any questions.
Nothing to add from my side. The only thing is that we should start, and maybe it should be prepared till the inter-office reviews, who's on the list. Then the reviewer can have a look on it.
I think that's a good point, Armin, that you know, this is mandatory under the Ecovis International General Quality Control Manual. So all firms have to comply with this. I think you have to comply anyway under local standards and local regs. Yeah, and no doubt, you know, when we do the inter-office reviews or the, you know, when we do the self-reporting, that will start to come into that as well. So, you know, something to be mindful of. And as and when we get more feedback, because obviously fairly new to all of us, you know, we're going to start to have, you know, reviews locally at some point from our regulators. You know, there's going to be more information that's going to be circulated in different countries. And, you know, what we'll try and do is collate all that and feed that back, either by webinars, emails, or IPM and RPMs. I think that's, so I think this isn't the last of ISQM. This is the start of us, you know, working together to try and implement it.
Yeah, and additionally, Stuart, thank you. As you said, since Ecovis International is also a member of the Forum of Firms, the Forum of Firms puts a very special focus on this issue, and also is requiring a confirmation from us in written form that we implemented ISQM1 and 2 in every member firm. So what we're going to do, as Armin said, this will be a part of the inter-office reviews. It is also a part of the self-inspections, and what we will require from the audit firms, also a written confirmation that you as member firms implemented it until the end of the year. And of course, we want to give most support we can do. So one part was were the RPMs, where we had that topic on the agenda very roughly. Second, especially for the audit firms, today's webinar run by Stuart, and many thanks for this, Stuart. And then third, we will sum it up with an email combining, say, the presentation from the RPMs combined with the link to the recorded webinar and the intranet link. And then we think we're all set for going forward.
Yes, I wanted also to add that the most important thing is to start, to have experiences and to be able to discuss them in the future meetings. This would imply that we will see it in the office reviews. But so the sooner we get started, the sooner we will see if there are any recurring issues that may require additional webinars and discussions and meetings. So please, if possible, try to manage the file as soon as possible.
And I think, just to add that, we've pulled this together to try and be helpful. It's our first attempt at it as well. And, we're interested in your feedback as well. So as you're going through, the tools and the illustration that we've provided, and you think we've done something wrong or something's particularly good or whatever, please do feed it back to us, because, we're still working on our own quality management systems, and, I expect them to evolve over time. So, I think the benefit of us being an international network is we can collaborate and we can share ideas and we can provide feedback. So please do that, and we can share that with everybody.
As Stuart, I will get a feedback from an independent person pretty soon, because on Monday our regulator started the control in our office. So it will be for a month here, and this tool was a part of this ISQM1 and 2 documents that are subject for the review. So you will see.
Yeah, and I think we actually paid for somebody to do a review of R1, and we got some pretty good feedback. So and the points that they highlighted, we fed into the best practice tool. So so hopefully it's good. Miloš's feedback will add to that as well. And yeah, we're keen to hear more, and we can develop it over time, I think. Okay, I think that's it. And thanks for sort of summarizing next steps, Alex. So I guess watch out for that email. And yeah, there'll be follow-ups in due course.
Okay.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Bye.
Many thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great lecture.
Thank you.
Stuart already left, yeah. Miloš, can you wait a minute?
Yeah.
Are we done here or not yet?
Yeah, the session is finished, so.
Okay.
We have no participants.
Stuart, Funny Check is doing well. Bye-bye. I call you, Miloš.
Okay, so see you.